Welcome back to another live episode of the Relevant Recruiter Show. I'm your host, Donnie Gupton, and today I'm thrilled to welcome Aaron Opalewski. If you haven't been on LinkedIn and you haven't seen Aaron, he is absolutely killing it, and we're going to share his story today. He's an expert in the recruiting industry and owns a whopping 7 businesses. So we've got Spark Talent, Spark Company, Spark Packaging, Ignite Search, John Joseph Partners, Flex Workforce Solutions, Bulk Creative Strategies. But here's the kicker that Aaron's going to share today is he's only actively really running one of those businesses. And he's done this through strategies, process, team building, leveraging great talent. And Aaron is going to share his expertise in the master of scaling businesses efficiently. So Aaron, thank you so much for hanging out with me today, man. I'm excited for this opportunity.
Thanks for having me on, Donnie. It's good to be here. I enjoyed our conversation earlier this week, and I'm excited to be here. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, it's been fun. I know we've been kind of following each other for a while, so I'm glad to finally sit down and pick your brain. It's been awesome to see your journey, kind of from the outside looking in. But give us the background. I mean, how did you get started in the recruiting industry? I always think this is one of the best questions because nobody went to college for it. So how'd you get your start?
Yeah, I did not go to college for it. And had I found it before I went to college, at all, I probably never would have gone because I loved it, once I got into it. But I was doing personal training and I was doing that to pay for college. And one of the people that I was training was a director at Aerotech, part of Allegis, now Ace Talent. But we got to know each other over a period of time. And little did I know he was recruiting me. He asked me if I wanted to do personal training forever. And, I'm not knocking that profession. I have some friends that do that at a high level and, much higher level than I ever did it at. But I knew at that point, I wanted to go, in my head at the time, into the professional world. I wanted to be in business. And I laugh about that now because, boy, did I not really know what that meant at that time. But that's okay. I was attracted to what he had going on. I could tell that he had built a successful career. And as I learned more about that and got to know him, and he told me a little bit about recruiting, I didn't fully understand it. But next thing you know, I was interviewing, accepted, a position with Aerotech back in October of 2007. So I believe that puts us coming up on 17 years next month. So
nice. So after Aerotech, what inspired you, or what was the next step in terms of you going out to your, start your first business?
Yeah, I had a great experience at Aerotech. I'm grateful for that time. I learned so much that, it really crammed a lot of learning into 18 months, and I'm just forever grateful for that period of time. Never really wanted to leave, but they, when I was there, they had a pretty large consolidation in 2009. In February of 2009, and I stayed, but I went through a day where they laid off 85 people, I think it was, and they had just consolidated 4 offices into kind of one, or I think there was 2, us in Toledo. And prior to them doing that, our office was about 80 people, and on that day where they laid off 85 or so, maybe 90, 75 out of the 80 people from my office, that I was used to working at were gone. So, and it was, me, a couple more people, and the higher level leadership was still there, but a lot of them were demoted in some fashion. And, a couple of days before that, I had received a demotion and I didn't know why. Kind of found out a little bit why a couple of days later,
right?
But I wasn't happy about that because, my numbers were good and I didn't feel like that was the right thing. I was bringing in new accounts, was growing, relationships and climbing up the rankings board. I was only selling there for 6 months, but I was at the time frustrated with that. And I stayed for another 2 months once that all happened. I'm very proud to say I worked hard, while I was still there. I did what I was supposed to do. But I was kind of a golden child there for my first 16 months. I worked hard. I stayed late. I wasn't done with my college degree yet. And at the time, you needed to have that. So I kind of had a little chip on my shoulder to prove myself. And, did some good things. They told us it would take 2 years to get promoted. I got promoted in 8 months. Everyone talked about it being a downtime. I'd never been in any other time. So it's like, hey, like, we're making placements. I'm growing my commissions. I'm learning. It's going pretty good. And it was. And again, it was a great experience. But that last 2 months where I was demoted and put, from account management back into recruiting was a tough period of time. But I'm just really proud that, I wasn't out there I wasn't like building this business at that time. I stuck it through. I think I did do an interview or two, but ultimately after about 2 months got pulled in, and the person that was leading that whole thing at that point said, hey, you don't really want to be here anymore, do you? You don't like me too much. And I'm like, no, not really. And again, like, I give that guy a lot of credit now. He was in a tough spot. He had to consolidate these things, and he just went with who he knew. Right. I saw it differently at the time, but he didn't have enough time to evaluate, 100 people that had never reported to him. That's a tough spot for any leader. And, I just have a different perspective on that now than I probably had at that point in time.
Right.
But so I left there in April of 2009, and I did one interview, like final interview, and I don't think they wanted to hire me because of my non-solicit, non-compete. I think they were a little worried about that, and the account that they wanted me to run was an account that I was running before, and I think they were just not wanting to touch that.
Right.
Totally understand. So in the process of that, what ended up happening is we decided, me and another guy that had left there decided to start an industrial staffing company. We started that and attacked a radius that was outside of a 50-mile radius from where we were working, and kind of built a business on the outskirts of Michigan, I'll call it, or the metro areas of Michigan. And, we ran that successfully for 4.5 years. That was a great experience. We did none of the things you should do up front in a partnership. We had some formal documents, which was good, right, but we didn't talk about who was responsible for what. We didn't really nail down an operating agreement. We didn't have the tough conversations that you need to have with partners up front to set up for a good relationship. We didn't do any of that. And I think some of that was a part of our success. We just went out there and we sold and we recruited and we went out and did. We didn't do an over planning, I'll call it. But as we had more success and the company grew, I think us not doing that and investing that time up front is what ultimately led to being best for us to go our separate ways. And, we both still, run and operate today, and there's more than one way to do things. And I think that's what's cool about business. So It was November of 2013 when we started Spark Talent. And that was an interesting time. A lot happened in the first 3-4 months. But by the time we looked up at the end of 2014, from where we started 2014 to where we ended, we had grown 800% plus. So big growth in our first year.
That's nice. So Aerotech to then a partnership to then now Spark Talent was the first of the businesses. What was the biggest challenge when you went like on your own? What was the biggest challenge kind of facing you?
The transition. People don't like change, and deciding to take the risk of being the one to start the new business and leaving the other one. It's harder to transition clients. There was a lot of conversations that went into us, separating, and it got to a point where I was just ready to move forward. Right. And so I inherited some additional risks with that. Again, being the one starting a new company, just like people don't like change. So going out, structuring agreements, moving people on payroll, right, having all these conversations, it's just bigger hills to climb than showing up to work the next day.
Right. Right.
So that was a challenge, but we were able to execute that. We started out with a team of 5, and I always have a special place in my heart for that team. One of those people is our CRO today and is partners in 5 of the 7, companies. So, we've had a great run. We've worked together for coming up on 14 years. And we were just out on a meeting together this morning. So that was cool. We don't get to do that a ton anymore, but it was fun to do it today.
Got the face-to-face action?
Yeah, well, we see each other a lot, but we're not in the same client meetings, a ton. So
that's cool. That's fun to have a person that's not a part of just one of them, but somebody you trust that's a part of, multiple ventures like that. When you started this business and you went to Spark, when did you actually add the next business number 2?
So it wasn't until 2021.
Okay.
So this was kind of, yeah. So it would have been, from call it, end of 2014, 2021. So yeah, 7 years.
Yeah.
And so, what we found is, we grew just like gangbusters the first year, and then again, 100% plus the next year. And then it was 2016, and all that growth kind of caught up with us, and I like to explain, a business can't outgrow the capacity of the leadership. And, I put that blame ultimately on me, that like I had to continue to grow, evolve, learn, and catch up to what we had experienced. And so in 16, I believe we were down maybe like 15%, something like that. It was the first time I'd ever experienced a year where we went down. So that was an interesting challenge. But we had figured out about halfway through that year that we needed to make some changes. So Fletcher, who I've been speaking about, our CRO, and I had both stepped out of the day-to-day sales at that point, which in theory was a good idea. But having a business that's 2.5 years old, 2 years old, and doing that, it was a good idea. It was executed too early. And so we found ourselves back in, to the day-to-day sales in the second half of 16, and we course corrected. And by 17, we were back on track to cracking off some records. And that continued into 18. And we just got on a good run again. So
nice. I think what you kind of brought up as a common challenge is kind of, when do I scale? When do I hire? When do I bring people, around? I mean, how do you determine, after being through this, kind of having the challenges that you went through, what you just mentioned of 2016, like how do you determine when a business is kind of ready to operate on its own without your oversight, so to speak?
Also nuanced thing, for sure. I look at, there's 3 things. There's acumen, there's time, and there's money, when it comes to situations. Right. So if we are going to, section something off, which hopefully I don't get too far off your initial question here, bring me back if I do. But like, if we're looking at section something off, like it's generally because either someone has the acumen that's at a higher level than we can do that sector, or they have the time. So we might be just as good, we might even be better than the person, but we can't allocate as much time. It's like, hey, this person has some acumen or the ability to learn that we can see in them, and we think we can develop them in this area. It's one of those 2 things. At this point, it hasn't been money because So our largest company operates on no debt, which is a tough hill to climb for staffing companies, like a company that actually does W-2 staffing, not just direct hire, but W-2 staffing. Something I'm proud of, because that didn't happen over a year. That was the product of, really executing a play over a 7-year period or so. We got ourselves in that position. And as we've grown these other companies, like we finance those, or I finance those specifically, promissory notes that give us huge flexibility compared to what you're going to get with a bank, and way better rates than you're going to get with a capital company. And how do I know? Well, when we started Spark and my company prior, we had to use the capital company. And so I have experience with that. And that's part of what, not knocking that at all. Like, I'm still close to this day with the person that we partnered with on that. But do I want to be paying them 25%? Like that's what it pretty much works out to be. And no, I don't. So we learned a lot from that. And as we're building this out, it's a big difference maker for our portfolio companies to be able to get access to money so they can grow, but at a fair interest rate. And specifically as interest rates have climbed, it's been a big win for us.
Love it. So a lot of what you did through your company was kind of ready internally, but then you've grown through acquisition more than like trying to build it from the ground up as you're looking through that.
Yeah, well, we built, I think what was important for us is we built Spark Talent organically, right, up until 2021, and really had 3 loops of major growth surges and learned from each one of those. When COVID happened, in 2020, which I don't want to talk about this too much because everyone does, like, oh, no one wants to talk about this anymore. I don't, that's for sure. But it was a key moment for us. In 2019, we were kind of going through one of those loops. So we tried to launch our IT division at that time, made about $500,000 investment to do so, and it didn't work. I love the guys to death that we brought in to do it. They were operating about a $300 million IT company. They were involved. One was an executive, one was on the team. And then we plugged in some components from talent into this unit. But we started it with, I don't know, we were doing maybe like 10, 11 IT placements a year, 1 a month, maybe, not a ton. And we just weren't able to get it off the ground. Like, that wasn't the right crew to get it off the ground. Had we had it farther along, it would have been great. Right. But it just was misalignment with where, like, it was not the right seat, for those people. And that was on me. It wasn't on them. And so that didn't work. And then 2019, some of the auto market had softened, and we were new to our other markets. So we had 9 offices, but 7 of those offices were 2 years old or less, had 5 team members max, and most of them had 1 or 2. And they were in shared office spaces. And so then when COVID hit, we didn't let anyone go, but we stopped hiring for a period of time. And in those small markets, like over a period of time, we had some turnover and we didn't backfill it. So next thing you know, we didn't have anyone in those offices. But what we started to see is that we were running everything centralized and that was working for us. And we were getting client relationships going, in these areas where we didn't have boots on the ground anymore. We were cutting our operating expenses, and we were ultimately making more placements. And so at about the midpoint in 2020, we decided we were going to go to a centralized model, move from a decentralized model to a centralized model. And that wasn't the striking point for setting up these other companies, but it was the genesis of that kind of lining up.
Right.
So I'll stop there and we can take it wherever you want.
Yeah, no, I love it, dude. This is excellent stuff. So obviously a big part of this was like, you mentioned when you kind of tried to launch the one, didn't have necessarily the right pieces of the puzzle together. You've mentioned your CRO a couple of times in here as kind of being the partner. What strategies do you use to identify and develop leadership with your companies?
Well, I'll answer it this way, and feel free to be like, Aaron, you didn't answer my question. But so what we learned, so we opened these offices and we tried to branch out an IT division within talent, right? And those things didn't pan out exactly. There's some wins within these things that weren't like complete failures, right, but they weren't going how we wanted them to go. And a lot of it came down to not the idea, but the who. And then hindsight being, 2020 on that, I would have gone all in on like one location compared to dinking and dunking in these 7 locations. I would not have done that. So, but we sat there and we were exposed. Because talent's not niche from a sector standpoint. And, we do now talent does skill trades, engineering, and professional level placements at like a mid-level, so like below director level. So that's what we do, light industrial as well. I guess I kind of lumped that into our skill trades. But that's what talent does. Well, at that moment in 2020, we were still doing IT. We were doing some executive search. We were doing all these other things, right? And I started during that 2020 year doing some coaching, with another recruiting company, which prior to 2018, I would have never been open to doing that. I would have been like, nope, competition, like no way, like no, we're just going to smash them. But I got involved in an entrepreneurial group, and I watched how the leaders of that group, which I hold in high regards, operate with competition, and how they would be open to sharing ideas, kind of like we are now, because it's not the idea that matters, it's the execution.
Right.
That's what it ultimately comes down to. But I watched how they did that and kind of opened my mind. Again, I only had mentorship in the staffing space for 18 months, and I was just taught to kind of hold everything tight to the vest.
Right.
And I had no other experience to that. So I got some exposure to that in 2018, and I ended up just starting to do some coaching with some guys that were local here to Rochester that had followed me online. And we got to know each other, and next thing you know, we were doing some coaching, and it was a situation where things that we were implementing, they were executing. And that was fun for me. That was energizing. And it didn't happen. It wasn't this like master plan, but we had worked together for about 6 months. Maybe it was 5. But we're coming up on their planning for 2021. And we looked at what they wanted to do on their plan for the year. And it was almost a blueprint of what we were trying to do year one for Spark Talent that we executed and ended up smashing. And so this person had talked about, the owner of that company had talked about us buying them at some point down the road. And I just like, man, this is to a T, like looks like what ours look like. I tried to find it. I'm like, man, if I could find this, so anyways, he's like, well, what if we just talked about coming together now? And I'm like, okay, I'm open to that conversation. And there was a lot that went into that, conversations with legal, conversations with accountants, looking at acquiring versus merging. And ultimately we decided to create a new company and take their business and then merge all of our packaging sector into that new company over an 18-month period. And that required a lot of trust and, just all across the board, because we had a rep that was handling some of that for us. And so we transitioned that from that person to this new entity over 18 months. And that's worked out great. You fast forward a couple of years and that person now runs our executive search company.
Right.
And that's not the only reason why, but it speaks to making decisions that are mission driven and team driven and what's best for clients. And it's funny how some of those things work out. I can't make that up. That's just what happened. But so that was our first one, Spark Packaging in 2021. We 4X'd what they were doing in the first year, and then we grew 100% in the second year again. And it's been a good journey. We're coming up. This is it's 2024. So this will be 1, 2, 3, 4. This is our 4th year, that we're in the process of closing out here. And it's been a wild ride, but it's cool to see where they're at. They've just had a record month 2 months ago, and a lot of good things going. So
that's awesome. How do you, it's funny because I work with entrepreneurs that are, would love to have the success that you're having, but just delegation is a challenge, letting go, and you're letting go of not just like a part of your business, you're letting go of almost an entire business, if you will. Right. So how do you create a culture of kind of trust that allows you to step back and let these companies run?
Well, I think a lot of it comes down to, because I own 100% of Spark Talent, which is the biggest company that we have still to this date. And we want to keep growing it. We're growing all the entities. So the most optimal thing financially for me, if I want to be selfish, would just be to crack off divisions out of talent and grow it. And there's instances where that makes sense. That's exactly what we should do. But where we find the right person within one of these sectors that has the acumen or time to do this better, provide a better service for our clients, I'm all in on that. So are some other people too, but I think that starts with me, being open to do that. And then that's contagious, for other people. So that's how we've kind of looked at this. It's all about the people. It's not so much about, there is a timing component to it. We went on a hot run in 2023 where over the back half of the year, we opened up 3 companies. And then Bolt, who I'm sitting here with EJ, and he's got us all set up today. We started that at the beginning of January. And that's our media company. It's the only one that's not directly tied to Workforce Solutions. But we've been trying to kind of up our presence and content and what we're doing since 2018 and could never get it right. And EJ and I have known each other for a long time. And we just happened to have conversations that led us to putting this together at the beginning of the year. And it supports all our entities in some capacity, does a lot of my personal stuff as well. And that was kind of the launching point for the business. And now, they're taking on external clients as well. So that one was not, it was a timing thing, right? Kind of, but it was more of a person thing. We've been looking for that, and we always thought we were going to do that internally, and it just kind of came together this way. And I was just at a meeting today. Someone I tried to recruit to talent about 4 years ago that wasn't ready. We've competed against each other at a high level for over a decade, probably closer to 13 years, and tried to recruit her on to run a division for us at talent almost 4 years ago. Maybe it was 3.5, something like that. So she had just started something new and wasn't ready at the time. She's like, "Hey, I want to give this its shot. I feel like that's the right thing to do." And I completely respect that. And we've kept in touch, both like we're local to each other, right, but also online. And she pinged me probably around July, like right as we're setting up a couple of these other entities. Of course, she pings me and she's like, "Aaron, I'm ready." And I'm like, "Okay, like, let's talk." And so timing wise, we probably wouldn't, we set that one's Flex Workforce Solutions, the name of that company. And they focus on the automation industry for like the technical and professional placements within that niche. And then they do all of our field service across the country within that niche. And so I probably wouldn't have just looked to start that in October of last year, but it's all about the person, and that was a 4-year recruit. And it's really about competing against someone at a high level and building a respect, with them over a decade. It's not something that just came together like that. It was over a decade plus of experiences together and competing against each other and, having this conversation and keeping the door open and, seeing that we're like-minded on social. And, to me, it was God's timing, but however you want to look at that.
Right. No, that's awesome. I like how you're nimble, you're not working off of like in some square box, whatever's kind of showing up in life. And, it seems like that's a strength of yours and how you've been able to kind of navigate growing these businesses is just kind of letting it happen the way maybe not on your time, but on, like you just said, God's time. I think that's really, really powerful, because I see so many people that just kind of get stuck in this box, and this is exactly how it's supposed to look and work. And that can, definitely hold people back. If you are listening live with us right now, go ahead and tap a reaction button. If you're enjoying what Aaron has to say, feel free to drop in the comments any questions you have as we're, sharing Aaron Opalewski's story on his entrepreneurial success. Systems and processes. How congruent are your processes and systems across the companies? Are they the same? Are they different? Is that a big part of your success?
That's a great question. I think it starts with, for us, our core values. So when we first started doing this, we let the companies create their own core values. And, the way we explained it is like, hey, like we might have different core values, but these are all good principles to live by. Like we weren't, like nothing was offsetting with each other. Well, our offsites last year, as we're adding more companies, and even for my own personal ability to keep up with the values, like we really took the approach that like, hey, these are different entities, but we operate under, the Spark company's umbrella, and we're all one team.
Right.
Going after one mission of creating 100,000 opportunities a year. We have the same purpose to help people grow, and like we are a team on this. And so to project that, to communicate that, to really drive down on that, we're going to go under, one value set, and we incorporated the Spark Talent values at all of the entities. Now, the other values that we had out there prior to that, still great principles to live by, in my opinion. But it was, because we want to hire, fire, develop, coach through these values, it was very important that we tighten that up and make sure that we're communicating that way, and then coaching our leaders on how to communicate that way. And so that was a big shift for us this year. And it's not just because of that, right? It's not like, oh, you just do that and things start clicking even more, but
right.
Things were clicking for us before. Otherwise, we wouldn't have kept to, rip those things open. But we're really seeing some major traction this year, where I think a lot of you hear a lot of pain out in the recruiting industry,
right?
And we're up this year. Like, we'd like to be up 100%. We're not. We're up 15.5%. Through August. That's what our numbers just came in at. But you go out on a 2-year snapshot and compare to the industry average, we're a 50% delta from the industry average over the last 2 years. And, last month was a record month for us almost across the board. We measure like 15 things, and 12 out of 15 we reached milestones on, either within a week last month or overall for the month. So major move for us in August. Like, the rent's due every day, so like we got to keep bringing it. But it's a product of meetings like I was on today,
right?
And that we have situations where it's not just one entity or one division working with a client. We're getting multiple companies or multiple divisions involved, and it just comes down to the whole premise of what we're doing is we can't all be the best in every area,
right?
And so empowering people, the right people, but empowering people to go into an area and own that, and really grow that is important, So
right.
The client we're in today, we're working with them at talent. We're working with them with our IT company. Our executive search company is talking to them. Our field service company was out there today to talk about a field service, project. And it's just, and then our HR team is in there talking to them about some things that we could do. So, these are 5-6 different business lines in sync with this client, trying to see if there's a spot to help them out. And fortunately, that's not the only conversation like that. Like, that's
right.
where we're experiencing our growth from, is stuff like that and service offerings like that, compared to just a one-off contingent opening that we grab from a client.
Right.
Like, we are not playing that game anymore.
Right.
Like, we do, like, and I'm not knocking that because it's a component of what we do. But when we look at how we're going to service a client and deliver value, we're looking at how we can get the different areas involved that are uniquely talented in that area, and not me coming in and say, hey, let us place your people on your floor. Let us place your engineers. Let us place your IT people. Let us place your executives. Let us do your media. Let us do your HR. Like, no, because if I'm trying to do all that, I'm going to be diluted down. Like,
right.
We got to have experts in these areas, and then a good sales team and leadership that can paint that vision to not only our internal team, but the clients on what we can do for them.
Right. What do you think? Because you mentioned something earlier that the industry is very, if you go on LinkedIn, you can see people that are struggling. I'm talking to a lot of people being in the, in the coaching spot. I talk to a lot of people that are struggling right now.
Yeah.
And then I have a lot of clients talking to you that are, we're not having maybe a banner year, but still winning. What, in your opinion, like, what do you feel like the difference is there? And obviously this is a pretty loaded question, but just what's your thoughts on that of people that you see winning right now versus those that aren't?
Good pipelines. To sum it up in a sentence, it would be good pipelines, but then, here's where you gotta be careful on listening to anything you hear online, right? Like everything's nuanced and within context. And like, again, like if I was running a one-person firm right now, you shouldn't do all, like you should probably pick a niche or, pick a sector and attack that sector. It's hard for me to say pick a niche because we didn't when but we were heavily focused on the manufacturing industry, and we built that, on, light industrial, skilled trades, some engineering and some professional placements. And then we expanded and invested in our engineering and professional services as we grew it. Right. But the things that I'm mentioning, like if someone's trying to do that all at once, it's too much. If you're providing a service and you could figure out how to maybe add another service offering that you're close to doing or having the acumen to do, and it's just kind of a nudge compared to an extreme change for you, that's how I would start. And then as you start to see success in that, like, well, if you don't have other team members, you're probably going to have to decide if you want to make that investment. But like my biggest mistake early on was thinking that I have to make extreme moves to see extreme growth. And I try and operate the exact opposite way now. It may not sound like that, but like I'm looking for slight nudges that have big impact.
Yep.
Hey, this client would be better. Oh, now we can do that more aggressively as we have these different industry experts, right?
Right.
Well, we're looking for slight nudges that are going to move the relationship forward with the client.
Yeah. Yeah. Small things lead to big things, I think is the way I would say that. And I like that approach. I mean, it's like, I think that's, people are always trying to hit the, swing for the fences, hit the home run. And I think, just kind of hitting those singles, doing those little things right, creates great opportunities for success. And I would agree on the pipeline thing. I speak with a lot of people and they get kind of handcuffed by legacy clients, and thinking that that's enough, and they're not on the systems and process. So leadership and mindset, I know you were just on the forum, the Mental Toughness Forum, with Ben Newman and a couple other, big brands up there. How important is it for you, running multiple businesses, to be dialed in with your mindset and not get yourself to the point where you're, stretched too thin?
I mean, it's everything, right? Because we have a core value, leading by example isn't just a way, it's the only way. And so we have another one, mindset's the foundation of excellence. So my mindset better be on point. And if it's off, if I'm off the tracks, I better get on the tracks. Like this is not evaluated every 3 months. Like this is a daily evaluation. So I feel like it's my responsibility to lead by example like that. And like, I need to set the tone, the pace, really be a good leader just by living it, that's how I would say that. So it's vital. And, create an environment where, we just did exercise, and I'm doing this more frequently, where I'll ask for feedback. And I think that's important too, right? Because, I'm not, like, all that stuff can be true. It doesn't mean I'm perfect. Doesn't mean I don't have things to work on. Doesn't mean that I handle every situation properly. Part of the way you make adjustments or learn is by asking for feedback. Hopefully you can do that prior to having to go through big mistakes and then adjust, which ultimately you will, right? They'll find you, and it's your choice. It's your mindset that creates the environment on how those things are going to be shaped, and shape your future. So another core value for us is conquering adversity is the recipe to success. And these are by design, because some of our biggest failures have turned into our greatest successes.
Yep. No, that's awesome. Now, has there been a specific mindset shift that you've needed when you went from just running, one business to then, okay, now I'm not necessarily in the day-to-day operations of all these businesses, but I am in charge of them. That, I've got, skin in the game with these. Was there any kind of mindset shifts necessary for that?
Yeah, I think so. I think first and foremost, it was that collaboration thing, how to be, hey, I believe I'm one of the most competitive people in the world.
Right.
And I have proof to back that up in many different ways. Last, I just did Ben's event, but I was at his, one of his boot camp things last October, and we're in a room, Navy SEALs, all kinds of different people, fitness people, and we did this plank challenge, and over 100 people. I stayed up for 32 minutes and won the thing because either I was going to break in half or I was going to win. I wasn't like, sorry. And it's like, right. Oh, that's stupid. Like, what did you get? Well, I got a belt. It's in my office. But like, there was no, but I'm just competitive, dude. You get me wired in that zone, and like, I'm gonna go. So that's what I love about what we do. We get to do that every day. But I had to figure out in the business world that I could be collaborative, still. So that was first and foremost on the mindset shift. And then really, I feel like I always did this. It wasn't that I didn't do this at all. Look at things from the client lens and like, how are we going to provide a good service? But there's just so many, like wherever I was at on this, like it really started to get worked on in like 2018 on this, on like, man, like we got to be obsessive with service, fulfillment, like how we do things for clients. And I was good at that when we were small, when it was just me. And then I think that got diluted as we went to 20, 30 people, 40, moving up to 50 people. Like I had a hard time scaling that. And I'm not going to say it's perfect now. Like we've improved so much on that, over the last 4 or 5 years. Mm-hmm. And I still think it's the number one thing that we need to focus, like one of the top 5 things we need to focus on. It's like sometimes when you get better at something, you realize how much farther you have to go. And right. So, I really like, there's a couple good books on this, but like you go to like a Ritz-Carlton or something like that, the hotel, and you just see the level of service that you're provided and how people speak to you and how they say, my pleasure instead of no problem. And just like these little details, like to provide this great experience. And it's like, those are the things that we're trying to put into the business. And so I had to really understand that, work on that. And then it's like, man, like if we're going to do that, Aaron, you're good at developing people. You're good at working, with entrepreneurs, inside the business. Mm-hmm. But where you're probably your best is working with people that are entrepreneurial, that also have skin in the game, that are going to, have to do some of these things like sacrifice wise, that like it's either you do this or you don't make it. Right. And so I can work with both, and both are good. And I'll tell you, I think 93, 94% of people, I think the stats show 93% of people are better set up to be entrepreneurs. I'm not like, if anything, that's the group that needs the love the most, because social gives a lot of love to the entrepreneurial side. Right. But I'll tell you what, there's plenty of entrepreneurs involved in our business that will eat the lunch of some of these other people, and they make way more money with less of the stress.
Right.
So
no, I think that's good to find something that works. Yeah.
It's not that one's better than the other, right. But for me, it was the way we're structuring, is that, within our 7 entities, the operators of these businesses, they report to me.
Right.
And those are the best reports for me to have, like for the long term. We have other people at Talent that are in C-level roles that it's best to have, the people at Talent, like reporting to them. I think that's been a good change. And then the reports that I have at Talent, well, I've worked with them for a decade or more. So those are good too. Those are strong relationships. But I like, and I hope I'd say this, but I like the way that we're set up. But it was getting there on the collaboration first and understanding like we can't get to this level of like Ritz-Carlton type, like white glove service unless we empower people. And for us, it was about putting some more skin in the game, across the board too.
Yeah, that's cool. I think those little touches are awesome, and really make for a memorable impact. I just shared this a couple of weeks ago. I was at my wife and I were at a steakhouse in McCall, northern Idaho, and ordered my steak. And then they come out and they open up a box of knives. And it was like, they could have just given me a knife, but they opened up this box of knife, explained to me all the different knives. And like, I'll
That's
always
cool.
remember that experience. And the steak was badass. It was good. But the experience of like just a little extra touch of these different knives, specific knives, and you get to pick which one you want to cut your meat with, was just kind of like an extra touch, which is like, those things go a long way. And it's cool that you're incorporating that into, the recruiting business, which you wouldn't find a lot of extra knife opportunities, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there you go. Like that story is like imprinted in your head now. And
yeah,
that's cool.
Exactly. It's an easy way to make yourself memorable by doing little extra things like that. You've given a lot of badass advice here, man. So I thank you for coming on and sharing. I mean, if somebody's going to go out and they're going to start, they've got a successful business, but they want to, add another like you have been able to do, what's the key piece of advice you'd give them, or like a mistake you'd say that you would find as being most common to help them avoid?
That's a good question. I could probably take that. There's a lot, to probably consider. But I think you really want to evaluate that partnership. It's a marriage, so you got to have the right situation. I think it's important to understand like, oh, they ripped all these things open. Yeah, but we're not talking about the 150 plus situations that we looked at that we didn't move forward with to get to those 7. You really need to be aligned with somebody if you're going to do that, and then you need to bring different things to the table. Again, I gave you a tactical way to evaluate that, but that would be my advice around that. If you get to that point, I think the next thing is you can't come with the mindset that like, okay, this is all this person's responsibility. My days generally start where I'll start getting messages at 6 a.m. and that could go not every night, but some nights upwards of midnight, even beyond that. But I got this pretty well controlled, time blocked out, like, leadership trees, where there's delegation of who, who's reporting to who and all this stuff. But I have 9 direct reports right now, all in all. I'm sorry, 10. Apologize. And so those 10 people at any given time are pinging me with a question. And it's not every one of them every day, but every day there's something on that. And then there's people that used to report to me that have transitioned that, you don't want to just necessarily go like light switch and like, okay, these people don't report to me more or anything like that. And if anything, I probably made some mistakes on that. And I've kind of tracked that back to where some of the people that used to have a one-on-one with me and we don't, well, instead of going cold turkey, like, can I integrate with them once a month? Or I'm sorry, once a quarter. Once a month's probably too much. But okay, that's a whole nother layer. And then it's being a servant leader, like, well, I'm still there to help with problems, right? So it's a nuance balance to this, but like you better be ready to serve those people. They're not serving you.
Yep. That's great. Great frame right there. I love that. What are you excited for, next for you? Are you looking to expand businesses? What are some of the next challenges that you're fired up for?
Yeah, well, I've been really excited. This year we have not added any, like we started Bolt at the beginning of the year, but we have not added any additional companies to the portfolio. We have looked at 2, but that's ratcheted down from the last couple of years where we looked at a bulk of those 150 plus. And that's by design because we got these 7 set up. We do have some other sectors that we want to add. I believe when it's said and done, we're going to have 13 companies within the portfolio. So we'll add another 6 and they'll own specific niches and we'll crack those probably off talent's list. And I won't list those out at this moment, like we could another time. But before we do that, if the right situation like lines up, cool. And like I'm meeting people, but again, like I use that one example, it was a 4-year timeline. I'm not selling anyone to anything. There's only been one person, you probably know him as well, but there's been one person so far that I have asked if they wanted to come into the portfolio. Everyone else has come to us.
Right.
And I don't want to, I have nothing to sell people. I'm not selling a course. I'm not like, that's not my thing. Like there's people like you that are better set up to do this with people, but that's not me.
Right.
You know, what I'm here to do is we're going to build this thing to create 100,000 opportunities a year, not in total, a year. Mm-hmm. We're tracking towards 4,100 this year. You know, that number might come up a little bit with our great August. I don't have that count till another week, but regardless, we're going to be about 4 to 5% of the way there this year. We got a long way to go, which means we have to keep building a great team. We're not going to do it with what we just have. We have to keep building on it. And so if people align with that, like that'll come up. But right now we're focused on taking these companies that are either at, you know, most of these portfolio companies outside of talent are somewhere between 1 to 3 million in gross profit. Yeah. And I say gross profit for a reason. Not saying revenue is not important at all, but in a staffing business, I'm much more focused on your gross profit and ultimately what kind of reoccurrings you have or the potential to do reoccurrings that you have within the business. But we want to take those things from the 1 million to 3 million, or the couple instances where we started completely organic and we're still trying to cross the $1 million marker. We're focused on that right now compared to adding. Because we know that we have a lot of room for growth, and we're trying to make these client introductions within our client base, right, to the companies we have. And that's working. You know, we're seeing good expansion from that, and we're kind of just getting our legs with a few of these in the second half of the year. So we're going to continue to focus on that, knowing that, hey, the better we do that, you know, hey, we take companies from 0 to 1 million, 0 to 3 million, then 3 million to 10 million. All we're doing is building case studies of what we could do for these different niches, and you know, the right dots will connect for us. Yep. So we're really just focused on growing these 7, continuing to grow these 7 like we are, and being in more meetings like we were today, where we have multiple companies sitting in there talking about solutions for clients.
Yep, that's awesome, man. I know we're both going to be a part of Ben Mena's Finish the Year Strong Summit. What are you going to be speaking on as that event comes up here in the next couple of weeks?
Yes, I don't have it in front of me, but there's going to be really 2 core concepts that we're going to talk about. And one is going to be the key fundamentals that you need to focus on within your business. And so we're going to get into some tactical stuff that I believe you have to have set up. It's not that I'm not a fan or we don't use any of the tools that come out, right? We're heavily invested in that. We have a person that one of their main functions is to test out tools and be on conversations. And so it's not that I'm not a fan of that stuff. But my high recommendation to everyone is not to just get shiny object syndrome and add tools just to add them. Like there's core fundamental stuff that we get to do here. And like, you want those tools to be an avenue to get you to these high value conversations, in my opinion, not to do all the work for you. And I think that that's another big proponent of why we're growing this year, is because we obsess over some of these fundamental stuff, and it comes down to humans getting on the phone with other humans still. Yep. And again, we're trying some of the AI stuff, and like, I'm not knocking that. And, you know, Ben's other event, right? Like, we have someone that literally their whole project right now is to go through all those talks and come up with ideas of which tools we should check out. But there's this core stuff that's like, man, don't think you're going to click an easy, bud. So we're going to go through that, and then how to build a team that outlasts you. That's the second part of that we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, it's awesome. For those of you that haven't had a chance to register, I just put the link in the comments. Register for the event. Aaron's speaking. I'll be there, and I think probably at least another 20 leaders from the recruiting industry. So it'll be an excellent event. So I'm excited to be a part of that. You got some excellent topics there. I love what you're saying about, man, I can't tell you how many people come to the call and be like, oh, well, I've got this tool and that tool. I'm like, okay, well, shelf the tool. What's the strategy? You know? And the tools are just a blinding thing in our industry, and there's a new one every week that somebody's chasing. And again, from my seat, I can see people just chasing tools, looking for that next savior. And I think if you leverage the tool to, you know, impact the overall strategy is where you get a lot of success. You know, I'm a big proponent of automation and AI, but there's also quick way you can kill your business if you don't do that the right way, and those are still built off of good strategy. So I love you sharing that, man. That's awesome perspective.
Yeah, thank you. I'm happy to. And, we're learning a lot in that area too. Like we are. So, I think anything you're trying to implement, you want to track data.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Go with the facts. Aaron, thank you for being here. Where can our listeners find you at, my friend?
At Aaron Opalewski on Instagram and Aaron Opalewski on LinkedIn. Those are probably the two areas I'm most active. I'm most active on LinkedIn, as I think probably most of us are, but also post pretty frequently to Instagram.
Awesome. Well, make sure you guys give Aaron a follow on Instagram and here on LinkedIn. I hope you guys are inspired today. One of the things as I was listening to Aaron is his ability to set massive goals. How many of us around here have 100,000, higher target? And obviously it's not for you to go set an unrealistic goal that doesn't align with where your business is at, but don't be afraid to stretch yourself. I think that's something that is a big, huge contributor of Aaron's success, is his ability to see big vision, think big, and then bring that to the team. So Aaron, appreciate you sharing with my audience today, doing everything you do for the industry. Congrats on your success. And thanks for joining me on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. We're going to have you on our podcast too. That's the other thing, Sparking Success. But we'll have you on in the upcoming weeks, or sometime before the end of the year.
Sounds good, man. Would love to be there. So everyone else, we'll see you back next week.